Hello, my name is Bo Dash and welcome to episode number 5. And if you guys haven't seen the previous videos, please go ahead and check them out. This episode is actually the continuation of episode number 4. So basically we started this painting in episode number 4 and we're gonna finish it in this episode. And if you guys don't know who am I and what I do, basically my name is again Bo Dash. I kind of introduced myself in the previous videos. My name is Bo Dash and basically I work in a game and entertainment industry for around 10 years. I work for big players such as Electronic Arts, all of and also Big Fish Games, which they create lots of adventure games. Basically, I think they are the biggest supplier for adventure games for mobile and tablet devices and also desktop computers, and all the way to the lots of mid-sized companies, pretty much all around North America and some of them in Europe. And recently I co-founded Zoolax Inc., which we create casual games for mobile and tablet devices. And lots of our games are actually free to play, so you guys can go and check them out. There's links to our stores, and there's links to our websites underneath these video descriptions. And basically, and our website is www.zoolax.com. So, and at the same time, follow us on Twitter, connect with us on Facebook. That way, next time when we put out a video, you guys gonna get notified. And let's get back into this painting. Basically, we started this painting out of nothing. Basically, we had this texture and we started painting over it. And we tried to pull out shape and we tried to come up with ideas, getting inspired by the texture in the painting. So that's why I named the last video title, "Does Creativity Worth It?" The reason I did that, obviously, because we started basically using the texture and coming up with ideas on the fly. And I'm not saying this technique is the best or the worst. All I'm trying to tell you is there's a lot of cons and there's a lot of pros about this technique. And lots of concept artists in the industry, they use this technique. And because it's a really cool technique, you just come up with really cool original ideas out of nowhere, and it just helps your creativity. But if you just started painting and you are an experienced painter and you just kind of started using Photoshop, or you just started working for a client, I wouldn't recommend using this technique. The reason that you might spend 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours painting and going over. And don't get me wrong, obviously gonna learn something through that process, but you gotta know some basic principle. Obviously you gotta know how to use Photoshop, to paint in Photoshop. You gotta know the basic principle about drawing, perspective, tonality, colors, and basically anatomy. So if you make a big mistake, you can get yourself out of a ditch. And if you don't know this, actually I made lots of mistakes in this painting, which I later are gonna fix. And that is just part of the process, because you're pushing yourself to kind of make mistakes. And sometimes you make mistakes in anatomy because you go in very, very loose in your lines and your shapes, and that's just bound to happen. And the reason you do that, because you want to use those mistakes to come up with ideas, because those mistakes might create some sort of shapes, they might create some sort of tone and line that you can use to your advantage and just give you an idea. And also the pros are very obvious. The pros are, you might come up with something really, really cool, something out of blue and fresh out of the box, and something very original. And the other thing actually about this technique is that I use, if you can look at the colors, I took lots of all this color palette that I use for this painting. Most of it came from that texture that I basically use as a underneath my painting. So it saved me lots of time. And as you can see here, actually, I have a lots of problem right now in the background because I painted it very, very rough. I didn't really focus on too much on the structure. And the left arm of this monster, which is on the right side of the screen, it's got some perspective problem and some anatomy problem. And also the buildings in the back, they got a loss of perspective problem. Because I painted them very rough, I just almost in a doodling kind of way. So that's bound to happen. And as you can see, the left arm, it just going very crazy. It's very weird. It's like in a perspective, but it's not in the right perspective. So I'm trying to fix it here, but still it doesn't work. And this is the reason I'm focused on this, because I want to show you guys something. Sometimes you make those mistakes, and I want to tell you how you fix it. Later on, actually, I'm going to go in and paint all over that arm and redraw, like, basically over it. And that way, I'm going to be able to make it look way much better. And obviously, you got to realize, this is not a technical drawing. This is a very rough concept artist. So not everything has to be perfectly, precisely in perspective. But still, it's just got to make sense, you know. It's got to make sense. And how much it's going to make sense, it's all up to your judgment. And again, I redrew the basically arm, but still I'm not happy with it. And all the brushes that I use in this painting are Photoshop default brushes, except one brush that I used, basically I made out of this big tree branch, and I'm using it all over the scene to create vegetation. As you can see here, I just pretty much erase the left arm and paint right over it, and that way my brain hopefully gonna get out of that making the same mistake pattern and gonna kind of fix it or make it look better. I think this time it's gonna look much better. Not perfectly fixed, but it's gonna look way much better. It's acceptable. Because in a bottom line, in the end of the day, this is a rough painting. It's not a super technical drawing. So you can get away with some mistakes here and there, as long as it's not too obvious. So you be the judge of that, you know, and you have to, but that doesn't mean you gotta be lazy and make mistakes left and right. But at the same time, if you get caught up in focus on the structure too much in this type of painting, you're gonna lose the main reason you started using this type of painting. The main reason you started this type of painting coming up with ideas. And sometimes when you focus on ideas, you lose a sense of perspective and everything. And if you're an experienced painter, you can go in later and fix those problems. And the other thing, obviously I made this like a stick figure for a human here, and it actually it helps a lot for the audience and for the painter himself or herself. The reason for that, because when you have this figure of human in there, your brain can compare how big is this monster and how big are these buildings, and that way it gives you so much information when you adding lighting and when you're adding colors or atmosphere, how much atmosphere and how much lighting you gotta apply. And the other technique I like to use, I use sometimes the smudge brush to move the form across, basically move it across the form. And I'm trying to make this painting looks like it's done by pastel, you know, like it's almost like a pastel type kind of look, got that kind of pastel kind of feeling. I don't know if you guys have used pastel in the past, traditional medium. I used it a long time ago back in school, and actually I think about 10 years ago or something, back in school. And the beauty about pastel, it's very soft, and you can get really nice tones, and you can get really nice lines. So it's very flexible. So when I started painting, I want to create that kind of quality in the painting. And I use a lot of lines here to describe the eye socket, describe the head, the jawbone. And the other thing you got to keep in mind, when you do painting, you're actually drawing with the paint. I'm drawing with those paints. I'm trying to describe the eye socket. I'm trying to design the cheekbones, basically draw the nostrils. But you kind of do it in stuff with tone. You kind of do it with colors. So it's kind of the same thing. So drawing is more important than painting. If you know how to draw, just if you know some basic theory about colors, you're ready to go. You can start painting. And as you can see, I'm adding I'm suggesting patterns, because this I don't want to get too detailed. I don't want to go in there and add too much detail. I want to have all my details very consistent all across the painting. So I'm trying to, if I want to add detail, I try to be much more suggestive than actually going in there and adding those tiny lines and getting too tight. There's that phrase in a drawing or painting. Sometimes somebody said, "Oh, you're getting too tight." What it means is you losing your looseness in your hand movement and your focus. And the other thing I like to do, I kind of don't have custom brushes. I just use mostly default brushes, and once in a while I make some custom brush. For example, for this one, obviously I made this tree a custom brush, because I want to create, I don't want to paint every single leaf, and it gives me a really nice silhouette. And everything you got to realize, these vegetations, I'm using them as a tool to guide the audience eyes toward my main subject. I'm trying to create these big shapes on the left side and the right side and frame my monster in. And adding some atmosphere to the back, just pushing those buildings way back. And those buildings are very suggestive. They're just like a couple of strokes. And it just gives you the idea of what's going on in the background. You gotta pick your battles. My battles are focusing on this monster and the main story right in the middle of the painting. My focus is not those buildings in the back. Those buildings, they just support the idea. They just support the story, which is basically this is a kind of ancient, overgrown city. And it is basically, it's very suggestive. Everything is very suggestive. And I would use this type of painting when I want to actually pitch an idea for first time to a producer or a movie director or basically a game designer, and we're not sure it's going to get approved or not. But it's just the first concept, and it is something to initiate talk. So that's how I use it. Lots of people might use it for concept or everything, but I use it to initiate talk, and we might basically, I would say, I pitch an idea. I'm like, oh, this game gonna be for mobile and tablet devices, and it's gonna be a role-playing game, and basically it's gonna happen in this forest, and that might get approved or that might not. Now I'm adding some light on the background, on actually ground, to break the patterns on the ground. And it looks like an actual sun. You see how bright it is? It's so bright against those dark colors. It looks so bright. It's almost like it looks pretty good. As you can see, I'm just like I'm trying to move around a painting, not focus in one area. What actually I still got that bad habits of like focusing on sometime in one area and going in there and just detailing that area, and you zoom back out and you see, oh, like you basically you haven't touched the rest of the painting. And that's one of the cons of using Photoshop. Sometimes when you got the option of zooming in, you forget about checking out the rest of the painting. So as you can see in this painting, I use a lot of zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. And when I feel sometimes that I'm kind of zoomed in one area for more than 20 seconds or 10 seconds, I try to zoom back out. Obviously, you're gonna spend a lot of energy doing that, mental energy, but that's just the way that's the way I think it works the best for me. Or you can have it zoom out all the way and just paint that way. But when you're doing high-res painting, sometimes you need to zoom in. So, and actually, if you look at it, like as you can see in the background, those buildings, they got all those perspective all like way off. Even though they're very rough, they're very suggestive, they still have to have some correct perspective. And at this point, they're not satisfactory. But it's still, at this point, I'm not fully done with this painting. I'm adding more ideas. I'm focusing on focusing on the story. I'm trying to ask myself, how can I enhance the story of what I'm trying to tell? Basically, for example, here, the hero of the video game or the movie, which is a female, and I thought it would be cool. She's a wizard or a mage, and she got a guide, or she got some sort of what do you call it, a minion, and it happened to be a chimp. And the reason I use a chimp, because it kind of makes sense. It's like an overgrown forest, and overgrown, like a forest basically is a city with trees and vegetation, and this chimp basically can jump around and knows where everything is, so it kind of makes sense. As you can see, like even when I'm adding those small tiny lines, they're describing forms, they're wrapping across a form, you know. I'm trying to show form, I'm trying to show like volume. I'm adding atmosphere, I'm pushing things back, I'm pushing things front. Everything, I'm trying to show as much 3D space as possible in the most economic way. So that's one of my other goals. Like because I feel at this point I'm kind of I kind of know what is I basically put down the basic elements of the story, and right now I'm trying to focus more on the structure. And at this point, actually, I'm trying to fix those buildings in the back. I drew my horizon line. I did a like very fast horizon line, and kind of eyeballed it. And I got these photos actually in China. And if you guys haven't visited China, go visit it. It's a beautiful place. And I'm using some photos just to add some fast texture to my buildings, because I don't want to spend too much time on them. So I want to use these photos to just add some texture to the background buildings, and obviously I'm gonna paint over them. But right now I'm trying to put them in perspective, so it kind of makes sense. Now I'm gonna basically erase them, erase some of the areas, try to blend them in. So the main goal when you lay down these photos, they shouldn't stick out like photos. In the end, you're going to use some lots of erasing and lots of painting on top of them, and you're going to make them blending right into the painting. Because the main purpose of those photos are to add some details in the background without me having to do too much work. Because I don't have a lot of time, like in the video game industry, or especially casual game industry for mobile and tablet devices. Time flies, and you don't have a lot of time. Even when you release a game, you have to make updates to the game the next day. So your time is very, very demanding, and you have to make sure you make things look really good in a short amount of time. They're actually very cool. Like, I'm actually very happy with those texture in the back. They look like these buildings with this cool pattern on them. They almost look like a temple. Well, those textures, they come from a temple, so. But at the same time, the colors, they actually fit very good too. Then I'm just adding some atmosphere, and I'm erasing over it, trying to push the arm front and push those buildings way back. This is another texture I'm gonna use. And sometimes the texture I use, actually, they don't make sense. But sometimes you gotta try. You gotta test and try. Sometimes they fail, and sometimes they succeed. And sometimes they look good, and sometimes they don't. But if you don't test them, you don't never know. And I do them very fast. Like, I don't spend 1 hour of each texture. I just throw a photo in. It took me 30 seconds, and I erase right over it. And as you can see, this texture is actually very, very light. You barely see it, but it makes some difference. Adds some detail. I'm just blurring I'm just trying to add more atmosphere, but just erasing over this basically light tone that I put in the back. Right now I'm just drawing with erasing through that tone. So using all this different technique to show volume and make the illusion of this basically 2D painting to be in this 3D environment. Because after all, you're working with a 2D surface. So it's gonna be very challenging to make it give that impression of it to be a 3D volume or like a 3D atmosphere. And the other technique I use is actually very basic, and lots of people I've seen they use it. Make a layer and you fill it up with black, and you put it on saturation or color, and that way it makes the whole painting black and white, and that way you can check your tonality. Because when everything is in black and white, it is much easier for the eye to basically check the tonality and see what works and what doesn't. How much midtones you have, how much dark tones you have, and how much light tones you have. Or if you have any. And do you have a nice contrast? You have to ask yourself all these questions. Those are the very basic questions you basically ask. Does it have a nice contrast? Does it make sense? Is it readable from far away as a thumbnail? If it's you want to use this image in on a very small screen, such as mobile and tablet. Obviously, if you use it on PC, that's a different story. But in most cases, you want to have it to be very readable. Most time when I work on a painting, I try to make it readable in a small and big size, because you never know. The other thing is actually recently we put out this new app on Android on Google Play, and go check it out. And I try to put a link to the app in the end of this video, and it's basically a live wallpaper for your Android phone. And we did it mostly as a fun, and it's free to use, and you guys can check it out and see if you like it or not. As you can see, I'm just adding more detail to that minion. It's like a chimp, it's like a very small chimp. And whatever color I use, I try to make sure it kind of fits into the painting, the whole overall color theme, which is kind of as you can see, it's kind of purplish, almost reddish. The colors, they kind of match each other. So you got to make sure you don't use a color that extremely stand out. It's got to blend right into the painting. And it looks like it must look like it belongs into the painting. And maybe you do it, if you do it for a style or you do it on purpose to make something stand out crazy, that's another story. But in this case, we're doing a very conventional painting, so we try to make sure all the elements, they feel like they belong into the painting. As you can see, like even this like a human that I'm painting, it's very rough. I'm not trying to paint every wrinkle or paint every pattern. Everything is very suggestive because I try to keep this consistently all through the painting. It's supposed to be very consistent. It's supposed to be very unified. All the details, the amount of details. So I don't want one area to have so much detail and one area to have less detail. Obviously, there's some part of this painting which got less detail, but they're done mostly on purpose. For example, the vegetations, they're mostly silhouettes. But if you go way extreme and make one area extremely detailed, that's not just gonna read well. That's not gonna look good. And as I say, there's always exceptions to every rule in a painting. But I'm trying to tell you guys about all the conventional rules in the painting and concept art. So everything that I say, you got to take it with a grain of salt, because all these rules can be broken. And if you look at actually the game and mobile sector, there's a lot of games that are coming out which they're using these strange, crazy graphics, which becoming very popular. So, and personally, I wouldn't say I wouldn't recommend anybody doing that. But at the same time, I see there's some of them, they're coming out with really cool, fresh out of the box graphics, and they're becoming very popular. So all these rules I'm telling you is right now there's got a place and it's got a purpose. These rules are purposeful and basically are for if you want to create something more conventional or something for a realistic RPG or a realistic game, something like that. So if you want to create something for a cartoony game, you gotta actually, you can break lots of rules because you got like more stuff to play with. And later on in a future episodes, I might gonna do something cartoony, just for a mobile and tablet device, something extremely cartoony. And as you can see, I'm using some flowers here. And these flowers actually, they were very cool. They had these like very kind of triangle kind of leaves. I've never seen them in my life. And as you can see, I'm just like I'm erasing right over. I'm trying to make them blend in. So I'm not putting that flower right in. I'm trying to make them blend in. And I'm painting right over it. So that way, I adding some detail and vegetation to that foreground, but I don't want to spend too much time. But since it is in a corner, I don't want to make sure that corner is very dark because I don't want your eyes getting out of the picture. And the other thing I have to tell you, whenever you do a painting, try to simplify it in your head. Like you got a foreground, you got a midground, and you got a background. And those are your basic elements. Even when we do matte painting for movies, we got those elements. Even in a 3D movie or 3D video game, we have those elements. Obviously, those elements can get more complex. For example, the foreground have other sets of elements. A foreground itself can have a background, midground, foreground, and so on. But as we are speaking generally, those are the basic layers of the painting. And that way your brain can categorize and organize things into layers. As you can see, I just took that right after the photo. I just want to actually add some sort of a crown or something like that to the head of the monster, and I like that. I really like that shape. So I'm teaching you guys a series of techniques, and since this painting done mostly to come up with ideas, so I'm using these photos to come up with some ideas. For example, that texture for the background building come out of one photo, and this crown, the shape come out of some photo. But obviously I'm changing it so much it doesn't even look like a photo anymore, right? At this point it pretty much blend right into the painting. But as you can see, I'm trying to even push that creativity even in the, almost the end of the painting. And I'm trying to make sure like it fits right in. And the great thing about it, if I give this painting to if you get approved, and if you pass this to a 3D environment artist, he can probably look at those buildings in the back. Even though it's very rough, he can take that texture and make a texture based on that texture. So that rough building in the back, it can inspire somebody to a certain degree. Maybe later on you're going to go in and create more detailed drawing of those buildings in the back. But for now even, they give some data and some information to a 3D modeler. And again, if you guys like our videos, subscribe for a future episode. I try to put out as much episodes as I can, and on the different subjects in video game and casual game industry or an entertainment industry. And I try to basically cover as much as area as I can. And again here, like I'm adding some atmosphere, I'm pushing that arm back. And those characters that look really cool. Like you can almost like now the whole story right now, as you can see, is coming together. It looks really cool. And even do some parts that look very rough, it's very readable. You can read. You can give this to a 3D model, a modeler, a character modeler, or environment artist, and based on this, they can create a whole environment and a whole scenery. And thinking all these colors, they come out of that texture that we use underneath this painting. It's amazing. It's phenomenal. We didn't spend any time to coming up with a palette or anything like that, because that was the purpose. The main purpose was coming up with something right out of blue. And again, this technique got a lot of cons and lots of pros. So you got to keep that in consideration. And I wouldn't use this if you're working for a client for the first time. And adding some foreground I'm using that big brush, and it looks really cool. As you can see, that big brush, it looks really cool. Like, just give me these awesome shapes. Adding some atmosphere, just trying to push those characters way back again. Because it's a 3D world, we want to give that illusion everything's standing in front of each other. And obviously everything that I do here, you got to test out for yourself. And sometimes you got to use them to moderation. You cannot use one technique over other. And the whole purpose of using all these techniques are showing geometry, showing form, showing atmosphere, showing distance in 3D space. So that's the whole purpose. And using these tools and this geometry to create a story. That's the main reason. The main reason to create a story. To communicate with an art director or communicate with a director, movie director. So that's the whole main reason. I'm adding this branch, this tiny branch, to basically move your eye from that corner right into those basically foreground characters. And as you can see, we got a lot of colors right now on this painting. and it looks really cool. I'm trying to add some final adjustments, and I think actually the painting itself is already looking good. I don't really need to do any adjustment. It's got a lots of like light areas, it's got a lots of dark areas, lots of midtones. Again, thank you for watching, and again, subscribe to us, and in the end of this video I'm going to put links to our apps and our games. And thank you for stopping by, and I hope I see you in a future episode. Take care. Bye. Again, if you like this video, please check out our other episodes, and also check out our free adventure game on iTunes and Google Play. Also check out our free live wallpaper for your Android phone on Google Play. You can try it for free. Thank you again, and see you later. Bye.